Kia ora, and welcome to the Nichecast. It is myself, Scotty the Scotty South, Auckland, here with the Wobbly Wildcard, currently dwelling in a NBA stadium up in Whangarei, which I assume is quite wet today, Wildcard, because it's rainy here in Auckland, and we are here to chat through Kiwi sporting matters. We got a bit of Benji Marshall. We got a bit of Stephen Adams. We got a bit of All Whites football. All Whites are back. They are playing a couple of games over the next week or so. And a bit of Plunket Shield cricket. Not sure what's going to happen there with COVID and scheduling and all that stuff, but we are approaching the start of the Plunket Shield season. So we're just going to spin a couple of yarns about the Plunket Shield, and today we're specifically going to target that little area outside off stump where a couple of Blackcaps are going to be playing Plunket Shield cricket and doing the domestic cricket thing. The best way to support the Niche Cache and the Nichecast and broadcasting Aotearoa sporting excellence is on Patreon. Head on over to patreon.com/elnichecache, elnichecache, and you'll get a karma boost. You get the good vibes coming your way. And we do some extra podcasts on the Patreon page as well. So if you are feeling generous, if you want to connect with the Niche Cache, join the Patreon whānau. And if you are a Patreon listening to these podcasts, thank you very much. Kia kaha, stay beautiful to yourself, Māori ora. Every Monday and Friday, we deliver a email banger. These email bangers come out Monday and Friday afternoon. They've got all the Niche Cache content right there for you. In case you want to be an avant-garde geezer, get off the social medias and just get the Niche Cache content straight to your email inbox. And there's always bonus yarns. That's the good thing about the Niche Cache. Whether you're a Patreon, whether you're part of the Patreon whānau, or whether you're reading those email bangers every Monday and Friday, there's always extra content. And that content is surplus. It is extra to all the Kiwi sports yarns at the niche-cache.com. Sign up to the email, go to the nichecache.substack.com, whack in your email address there. So you got Patreon for extra content. You got the email for the avant-garde, fuck social media, extra content. And you got the niche-cache.com, where we are broadcasting Aotearoa sporting excellence. Wobbly Wildcard. I won't ask you how the weather is. I'll ask you for some mindfulness, because we've got to come correct. We've got to come correct for the Nichecast, and that is what I'm most curious about right now.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you already know what the weather's like here, so you don't need to ask anyway. Mindfulness is from old Japanese master Dogen, who says, "A fool sees himself as another, but a wise man sees others as himself."
Could you just repeat that one more time?
A fool sees himself as another, but a wise man sees others as himself.
So is that connects to our last one, and some very not sure if it actually connects to the last one, but it connects to like the general premise that we have here with the mindfulness quite often of being connected to others and seeing yourself and others and wishing well for others, because that is you, kind of, in a way. You're connected to that person, so why would you want to wish bad upon that person when you're connected to that person?
Yeah, the interconnectedness of all things makes sense there. And I guess it's also like to put that in other words, it's like a lesson in empathy, isn't it? It's like being able to see the way, like, 'cause that's effectively what that quote is saying. It's being able to see the ways in which you're connected, like not just knowing that it's true, but seeing how what you have in common with someone and being able to recognize that in another person's things that you see in yourself. And I guess that does make you, more, I don't know, generous of spirit and things like that, and more willing to do good for other people in a way that's not just how can it benefit myself doing this for someone else, but like how can I benefit them? Because if I I mean, I suppose it's not too much of a leap to say that this leads into the old like what goes around comes around kind of thing, isn't it? It's like uh, pass it along, and if you do well for others, you trust that others will do well for you, and then it does come back to you in its own way. But it doesn't happen if you're only out for yourself, is it? And the first part of that quote as well of what did he say? Like a fool sees himself as another. It's also a I guess a delusion of sorts, isn't it? Is like looking at, you're not recognizing the things that are in common between yourself and someone else. You're not even recognizing yourself properly because you've got, for whatever reason, I don't know, it could be aspirational. I am this thing, but I want to be that thing. Or I am this person, but I want to be that person, that kind of thing. That is going to affect the way that you act and behave, isn't it? And if it is aspirational, then that's also going to lead you down perhaps maybe a more of a selfish path when it comes to certain crossroads where you're in a position to be like the first half of that sentence or the second half of that sentence, I suppose. Is it's funny how the ones that seem the simplest, the quotes that seem the simplest end up being like the ones where you can draw the most from.
Yeah, because any with this type of mindfulness, anything other than simple is really confusing, and it takes a lot to digest. It's like that's why the simpler mindfulness ones are so easy to comprehend. They hit you right where you need to get hit, and you can instantly extrapolate your ideas out to it. Whereas the more complex these mindful ideas get, well, you got to do the mahi to first understand it, and then get yourself down the track. To the pitch of the delivery, if we're continuing those metaphors, and hit it for 6. Benji Marshall doesn't hit sixes. He plays rugby league, and he doesn't play rugby league anymore. And he doesn't play rugby union anymore. He is retired from those sports. We have talked a bit about Benji Marshall over the last few weeks, Wildcard, and we've reflected in various ways on his career, who he is, and all that stuff. So I don't think we need to do the tribute thing to Benji Marshall. Shout out to Benji Marshall, greatest Kiwi rugby league player ever, one of the greatest rugby league players ever, and just one of the greatest Kiwi athletes ever. I'm kind of curious about the era we're working in, and this ties into the always, because one of the key ideas we're working with here is we haven't seen the All Whites in a long time, and by the time they play, it will then flip over to the Aotearoa Kiwis, who we have not seen play rugby league. And Benji Marshall is retiring at a time when Kiwi NRL numbers, whether we want to measure that in debutants, whether we want to measure that in like the upper class or like the guys in their 3rd, 4th, 5th season who are really starting to blossom, like your Isaiah Papali'i, Marata Niokori type of chaps. Benji Marshall's retiring right at the time when Aotearoa Kiwis Rugby League is moving. It's already moved into a pretty nice space, because the last time we saw them play, they won a few games, and that was cool. I say all this not knowing when the next time we'll see the Kiwis play rugby league, so it's hard to pinpoint that. But I'm just being deep in the rugby league NRL weeds, and especially the Kiwi NRL stuff. I am extremely hopeful and optimistic about Aotearoa Kiwis Rugby League moving forward. And I believe Benji Marshall's retirement kind of puts a bow on like that era. Because now we're moving into a new era where a lot of the veteran players have moved on, and we're going to see a Kiwis team that skews a lot younger and skews into like just the abundance of talent that is available and on offer. So I think maybe in a weird way, reflecting on Benji Marshall has me curious and excited about Aotearoa Rugby League moving forward, but just with that Benji Marshall tinge, because we know a lot of these Kiwis players and just any footy code, rugby or rugby league youngster, they've watched Benji Marshall. They know who he is. They know his greatness and all that stuff. And I think you're going to see a passing of the baton, so to speak, to the next kind of stage and phase of Aotearoa Kiwis Rugby League under Michael Maguire. and moving forward. So that's just how I wanted to set up the Benji Marshall stuff, because that's where my mind goes. Yeah, shout out to Benji Marshall and his whole career. We've done all the tribute stuff. There's plenty of tribute stuff happening. But Benji Marshall, maybe in summary, he leaves rugby league, and specifically Aotearoa Rugby League, in a fantastic position. And hopefully, because like he does have some kind of connection to Michael Maguire, hopefully Benji Marshall might get involved in Aotearoa Kiwis Rugby League moving forward as well.
Yeah, that idea about the new era is pretty interesting, because we are going to talk about the All Whites a little bit later. And I think maybe just the long stretch in between fixtures kind of makes that, I don't know, sort of bookends that in a way where like it makes that transition a bit more obvious, where it would normally have happened slowly over the course of a couple of seasons and a couple of tours, and you'd start to get some guys pushing through. I mean, there already was like some of the guys you're talking about. Obviously, a lot of them have played for the people who are going to be dominant players for the next 5 years. They've already played for the Kiwis, but there are some who haven't had the opportunity, or they haven't had the like I remember, I think, was it the last? It might have been. I'm trying to remember when they last played, but I remember Brandon Smith having like a breakout game in the last year, at least during the last stretch. I don't know if it's the last couple games, but like that was the start for him. Like, look at what he's done since, as he's just gone on and was he like dummy half of the year or something, where he got some award over the last couple of years. He's won a premiership over that time. He's been in like a just gone on to become one of the impressive players in his position and beyond. Like that sort of that transition would have started, but it would have continued on in those slow increments where it's just steadily sort of eventually swapping over from one side to the other. Here instead, because you've got this whole chunk of like 2+ years without Kiwis games, like that transitional stuff is what gets lost, and you just sort of you just pick up where you can. And it has been this big chunk. And the reason that the reason they got me thinking is because that's kind of exactly what we're seeing with the All Whites as well. It's that they went about 2 years without a game. They went about like 3.5 years, I think, only playing about 3 games or two games, I think it was, in that stretch. And because of that, like you did Danny Hayes' first 2 games, you did get a very young team. You did get him chucking several debutants in there. But it was like a false start in a way, just because there was such a big gap before those fixtures and such a big gap after those fixtures. What you've had since instead is you've had like I think the under-20 World Cup might have been just before the last All Whites fixtures, but you've had like an Olympic campaign since, and a lot of guys just going and doing impressive club stuff. And so the players who were, already on an All Whites trajectory back then are now suddenly going to be key players for the All Whites. It's not just that it's not like that they've just been picked out of nowhere, but they've definitely made a big step up since then. And it will be quite a young team that we see against Curacao and Bahrain, and a young team that there are like remnants of the Anthony Hudson days and before that. Like there are senior players in that squad. Like Winston Reid won't be there as a player, but he'll be there as sort of like effectively as an extra coach, and he's hoping to be playing down the line. But Chris Wood will be there playing, Michael Boxall, Tommy Smith. Like there are guys left, Bill Tuiloma, but these are the guys who are like the best of the best from the last generation. All the sort of middling players have dropped off the end and been replaced by the next like wave coming through. Like they've overtaken them, washed them back out to sea. These guys are pushing through, and it will be a very different looking team. And yeah, it's quite exciting to think about what that might look like from the Kiwis' perspective as well. And I suspect that if it's the case for these 2 international teams, it's going to be the case for most international teams who've had a long break as well. Like you can't just pick up where you left off because of the time that's passed. And so you will get like these, you don't revert to older players, you revert to younger players when these things happen. So we will get like a lot of these refreshing type of situations. It's just that, yeah, for the All Whites, we get to see some of that on the weekend. For the Kiwis, we there's the World Cup that's been pushed back a year, isn't it, or something? Like that's penciled in for 2022. The hope is that we'll get that then. but there's no guarantees right now, is there? There's nothing locked in for the Kiwis on the horizon, which is a shame. Shame that Benji Marshall didn't get to add a couple caps to his list as well, because he was sort of pushing back in there late on. Did make a comeback for the Kiwis? Was it 2019 and 2018, something like that? But so it goes. We have talked so much about Benji in recent times, knowing that this was a likely eventuality. So we've probably said all our words on his greatness. But yeah, that idea about the refreshing of the Kiwi squad is pretty interesting in that context.
It is, but it's also kind of framed like it stems from just awkward Kiwi stuff where like it's an international team. It is the rugby league team of Aotearoa. And given how popular the NRL is and how popular the Kiwis can be in specific moments, there's something that has also existed throughout my fandom of Kiwis rugby league, and that is just like underwhelming bullshit. Like, just like not like Benji Marshall and Sean Johnson. I don't remember how many times I saw them play together. And you've just got these pockets of like players who didn't really play. Like Benji Marshall's Kiwis career, he won the 2008 World Cup, and that's like a high as watermarker moment. And then Stephen Kearney just like kicks him out as captain, and it's kind of like that's the end of Benji's Kiwis moment. And then you get the Kiwis 2014, they're really good. That's kind of peak Jason Taumalolo stuff. And then you just have these like years where the Kiwis suck and they can't get their team on the park. And then you get the whole 2017 World Cup situation where it just like, I view it as the Kiwis kind of imploding from within, because David Kidwell was already a shit coach for the Kiwis prior to that, touring England, and he built the culture where those Tongan players didn't want to be a part of it moving forward. And it's just all that stuff has happened where it's just like, let alone those tests against Australia. We all know them. They play 5 tests, the Kiwis are going to play well in one of those tests. Like, it's just how it goes in my lifetime. And so you get really hyped to see the Kiwis play rugby league. They play Australia and they're shit. And it's like, okay, normal service resumes. Like, it's all those little moments that build up, and it's not quite like New Zealand Warriors curse position, because the Kiwis have actually had some really fantastic moments that kind of lure you in, get you excited and stuff like that. And reflecting on Benji Marshall's career as a Kiwi, it's like, you've got that 2008 moment. You've got all the shoulder injuries that not only curtailed like his NRL game time, but his Kiwis game time. Then you've got the him being sacked as captain for no real reason at all. And then you do get the fairy tale at the end where I think it was 2019 where they had that series against Great Britain. You got all those cool moments, but it's kind of this like you've just got lost years in there where Benji Marshall and Sean Johnson didn't really play together. You just didn't get like Benji Marshall and Roger Tuivasa-Sheck a whole lot either. And it's like, part of it's like really underwhelming for the Aotearoa Kiwis. And I say all that because it's like, now I think my hope is that we can kind of get a bit more solid and consistent with Aotearoa Kiwis Rugby League. The players are there, the talent is there. I believe the coach is there in Michael Maguire, and you've got even more talent and players coming into the availability and eligibility for Kiwis Rugby League. So I think my hope and optimism here is it stems from a place of always kind of being let down, or not let down, just having air escape my Kiwis bubble. Just a little bit of deflation, boom, full of air, win a game, deflation, and just stuff like that happening. And I think that underwhelming, mix and matchy, great moments, a lot of shit moments, I think that kind of sums up Benji Marshall's like Kiwis career, or the period in which Benji Marshall existed as a Kiwis player, not necessarily his Kiwis career, but just like since 2003 up until this moment, there have been great moments with Benji Marshall as a Kiwi. There have been moments that never existed as well, and that's kind of the story and the history of Kiwis rugby league.
Yeah, I think it is more the period than the player there. I think some of that is just the nature of international sport, especially international sport in a sport where like the club stuff is the dominant factor. Like that's obviously not the case in rugby union, is it? Where like international rugby, especially in this country, is the pinnacle, and like there's absolutely no competing with it. That's maybe, I think there's a lot of times where that clouds the cricket would be in the same situation as well. International cricket is a big step up from domestic cricket in New Zealand, both financially and competitively. So like, I think the two major sports in the country being in that situation, I don't know if it distorts things. I'm sure it does distort things for people sometimes. International Rugby League, as we've seen in the last 2 years, like it's the first thing to go when you need to rearrange around a pandemic. All Whites fixtures were the same because the All Whites play a lot of friendly games, and those ones, you know, they don't really matter. They're difficult to organize. That's the thing that gets chucked in the bin. So like, there's always difficulties when that's the thing. Like I was just looking it up because I was thinking about, you know, the time that Benji Marshall himself would have missed for the Kiwis, and like, Winston Rufer is probably the best footballer New Zealand ever produced, especially when you look at like what he was doing in his era, like doing things, you know, 30 years ago that guys to this day, at a time where we have the most professionals we've ever had by a wide margin, are still not competing with. Like I think he was the top goal scorer in a Champions League season one time. Like that's in a category with like Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo, you know, like he played 23 times for the All Whites in his career that lasted nearly 2 decades. Like, and he was playing for the All Whites when he was like, before he went to Europe as well, like when he was like 18 or whatever. He was playing at a young age and he still only ever got to like 23 caps. It's not a lot. And it was like, that is as much to do with the era he was in as well than him. There obviously would have been situations where maybe, I don't know if the FIFA rules were as clear back then. I don't know, maybe when you're the only guy from overseas and they're trying to pick a squad, it's just easier not to pick that guy, even if he is your best player. Things like that would have come into the mix. Definitely like the time he was in didn't help. But yeah, it's interesting how those things go. You don't really get to go back and rewrite history and wonder, would the All Whites have made another World Cup in his time? Probably not. I don't think they ever would have had the squad around him. But like, it's the same reason it's interesting to think about what Benji Marshall might have achieved, but I suppose it's more about like, let's try, rather than like rehashing the past, let's hope that the future has a little more clarity to it. And these international teams and their calendars and everything is just a little more defined, and we don't see the same thing happen so much.
Yeah, maybe and a supreme optimism and hope. I think the passing of the baton from era to era is we're going from the like mystery darkness era that we've just explained and walked through, and for strictly on the Aotearoa Kiwis, maybe we're coming into an era where the Kiwis are playing all the time, and there's a growth in Aotearoa Kiwis rugby league that is like tangible. It's evident. They're competing at a high level. They're connecting with the community, because that's the other thing that I've always pondered is it's New Zealand's national team, but Kiwi rugby league fans don't really get to see or touch or feel their Kiwis players in that environment. It's just kind of like they're in Australia, and then they might, like for a while, they just played tests in Australia. They didn't even play in New Zealand. So it's like, how can you connect with your national team if they're not even in the community? And so it's kind of, that's where I hope, I envision Kiwis Rugby League getting to, where you've got the talent and you've got the consistency and solid nature of that team and their schedule, where they're actually a team you can connect with as opposed to being a distant thing. let's use that as a nice little entry point to these All Whites games coming up against Curaçao and Bahrain. These games are going to be held on the 10th and 13th New Zealand time, which I think is Sunday. We've got a Sunday and Wednesday for these games. First game against Curaçao. Just to keep us nice and streamlined here, Wildcard, because you've written about the players selected, and you're also coming into this having coming off that Olympic campaign where it was pretty fun. I'm curious what you think about the style of play for this All Whites team, based on what you saw at the Olympics. Danny Hayes, the coach again, coming into games against Curaçao and Bahrain. What can Kiwi football fans expect to see, like as far as style of play for the All Whites? Are they just going to bang it up to Chris Wood? Are we going to see a bit of playmaking in the midfield? A lot of it, you've got Kakachi on the left flank. You've got Joe Bell is currently whipping in crosses and delivering them basically like a Murali Duran Dusra, landing on the spot. Like all his assists are just golden. So like coming off that Olympic campaign, heading into actual All Whites footy, what do you just see as some like interesting points about the style of play, tactics, formations? And then I want to ask you about key players, but if you explain the formation, if you explain the style, then we can start to integrate who are the key players within that structure moving forward.
Yeah, well, you can probably guess who the key players are going to be, but yeah, it's interesting to look at how as much as who, but yeah, like I think at the Olympics, it's fair to say that the All Whites were a bit more defensive than we probably hoped to see. Definitely a little more defensive than what we had been promised. I think the first game against South Korea, that was a little bit more understandable because like first game against the top team in the group, you just want to keep things tight and hope to get a result. Like a draw would have been good. They ended up winning, but that's understandable. I think the game against Honduras, however, where they continued on a similar vein until they opened it up a bit more later on. Like I think it was clear that we saw in that game they're better when they've got a bit of possession in midfield and you let those guys get to work. And I suspect in a couple friendly games, there's no real reason to set up defensively. You're going to be a little more aspirational. You're going to be a little more ambitious. And so I think we probably will see the 4-3-3 shape that we saw from Danny Hay in his first couple games that we saw from him when he was coaching Eastern Suburbs. I think that's probably what he prefers. He definitely has an ex-centre back's pragmatism about him. So I think that's what we saw at the Olympics, but and there's nothing to lose in these games. You're going out there trying to play your best football and build towards what you want the team to look like when you come up against better oppositions and games that actually like matter. So from that perspective, yeah, I expect to see an All Whites team that does have those three guys in the middle. And you do have Sarpreet Singh back as well. So Sarpreet Singh being there gives you that guy who can play at the top of a midfield triangle as well. And with that, like I suspect they will try to build the ball up from the back. I suspect they will try to get their fullbacks, especially Kakache, overlapping, trying to ping in some crosses. I suspect there will be a focus on getting the ball to Chris Wood in the penalty area, which is exactly what you need to do. And it's just a matter of how he will have guys like if he unless there's like rotation and he wants to give everyone a go or whatever, I suspect what we'll see like the full strength team would have a front three of Chris Wood in the middle with McCoward on one side and Elijah Just on the other, which means that Wood, as the big target man, will have two very good off the ball movers around him to help create space, and another very good one behind him and Sarpreet Singh as well to do the same thing, but also someone who is especially good at like pinging a pass as well, which actually It's not as much McCallum's game. McCallum's a little bit, he gets a lot of assists, but he's also a bit more of a pure goal scorer. Eli Just is definitely someone in that same vein, but because Singh's getting the ball deeper, I think he gets more of that. Like, it's not a comparison between the players, it's a comparison of the roles that they're going to be in. Singh will get the ball a little deeper and like have the opportunity to pull some strings like that. And yeah, like Joe Bell has been an excellent crosser of the footy during for Viking this season in Norway. That is both in open play and also from dead ball situations. And I suspect against both Bahrain and Curacao, I suspect dead ball situations will be a good opportunity for the All Whites. They do have some tall timber in there. They've, you know, Chris Wood, obviously, but also someone like Michael Boxall at the back. Obviously, Winston Reid won't be there, but there'll be, there's not so much with the other attackers, but definitely some of those defenders are big bodies who can get up there and do what they want. Tommy Smith as well scores quite a lot of goals for a centre back. So, like, Joe Bell whips in a great dead ball. Sarpreet Singh whips in a great dead ball. No Clayton Lewis, who would have been in a similar mold. Obviously, the Aussie and New Zealand-based players not available, but there's plenty of candidates there who can put the ball on a dime, and there's plenty of candidates there who can put that ball then therefore into the goal. Hopefully, because I do really want to see them win some games. It would be nice. Like, it's not the be all and end all, but it would be very nice if they can like win some games, work their way up those FIFA rankings. As much as they mean absolutely nothing, it's still not everyone seems to know that they mean nothing, and therefore it would be nice if they were a bit higher up and a bit more reflective of what they can do. And all of that is going to be like interesting to see how they go. It's not like when you haven't played that much. I know there is the Olympic stuff coming on, so it's not like they're coming in from scratch. There's a lot of players from that Olympic squad who can bring forward what they did there into this squad, but they're not going to have a whole lot of time to prepare beforehand. So I tempered expectations a little bit, but yeah, like results would be nice.
Just because we're coming off that rugby league discussion, I see a lot of similarities. Well, we've explained a lot of similarities between rugby league and football in Aotearoa, but we're thinking about like the fresh wave of Kiwi sports talent that is on offer now and has been brewing for a couple of years. These footballers, like the guys like Joe Bell, Sarpreet Singh, Kakache, they are playmakers. They make shit happen and they create stuff for their team. They aren't exactly players we've had in abundance in previous years. We kind of go more workhorsey especially in those midfield positions. Like, we don't have the famed niche cast reference. We don't have the Pirlo types who can thread a pass. Like, it's all very typical Kiwi style. Traditionally in football, I'm thinking about Kiwis, like it just seems like the younger players that are available for Kiwis are playmakers. Like, yes, there have always been playmakers, but there hasn't been a Brandon Smith. Yes, there have always been playmakers, but there hasn't been Joey Manu. Yes, there's always been playmakers, but there haven't been like four halves playing halves in the NRL to select from, because otherwise we select Tohu Harris in the halves, or otherwise we get one of the Robbie Paul, Henry Paul types from England to come in and play in the halves, or Isaac Johns playing in the halves, or fucking Kenny Bromwich is playing in the halves. It's like we haven't had you've got the playmakers, like upper echelon playmakers, Brandon Smith, Joey Manu types, but then you just haven't had the solid starting depth to bolster the national team. And I see a lot of similarities in the All Whites, where you have players who are genuine playmakers, and you also have better depth where a lot of these guys, most of these guys are actually starting in their club teams, as opposed to like, hey, we're the All Whites, we're selecting a squad, let's go select this player from the second division bench in Japan. Or, we're the Kiwis, we need a player here, let's go select this guy over there who is playing in England and his long lost grandfather was born in New Zealand, so let's get him into the team. Like, we don't have to do the desperation reach to get the talent. And I think the All Whites and Kiwis have that in spades. And just thinking about the All Whites, I think that is the most exciting thing is, yes, we have Chris Wood, the typical Kiwi striker. Yes, I'm sure there are, let me check this group of centre backs named for the All Whites. You've got like some of the typical Kiwi centre backs. You've got the Boxall, you've got the Tommy Smith, you've got those characters. But the exciting thing is that there are playmakers in the All Whites team, just as there are playmakers in a lot of these other Kiwi national teams as well. Are you seeing like an engine room where you've got Joe Bell, Sarpreet Singh, and who else? Like you mentioned a 4-3-3, which seems pretty standard for football these days. Is there a combination here in the All Whites midfield, or just a combination in their first 11 that they could select where it's like, holy shit, this team has far more attacking impetus than previous All Whites teams? Like, can you see that kind of situation playing out? Or will it be more of Joe Bell and Sarpreet Singh suddenly, Ivan Vislic and Simon Elliott, where they put on the New Zealand jersey and it's all just about kilometers, mahi, and shoveling the ball along?
Yeah, I mean, there's different ways to attack. I think the point in shifting it just slightly, I think maybe the factor here at play is the possessional stuff. It's like they can because you can score goals just by pumping the ball long into the box and giving Chris Wood an opportunity to do Burnley ball stuff. You can also score goals by pinging 30 passes together from your back line all the way to the forwards and tapping one in and 6 yards out after, all of that work and shuffling defenders around everywhere. And they can play Burnley ball for sure. Like the All Whites, I've already mentioned, like some of the dead ball specialists they got in that team. And obviously Chris Wood on the end is like a bit of a master at that kind of thing. But also like they have a little bit of variety in that being able to play some more of that positional stuff. I think Ryan Thomas isn't with this group right now, but if you chucked Ryan Thomas into that team, someone who is like outstanding at that type of football, as good a player as we have at doing that kind of thing, like him next to Joe Bell and with Sarpreet Singh in front of them, sort of thing, is a pretty like it's good a midfield combination. Surely, like as a 3-man combo, it's got to be as good as the All Whites have ever had. But then you chuck in like Marko Stamenic as well, who is a little more like a couple years younger than those guys, but who I and many others have huge raps on as more of a defensive midfielder, but also someone who's very good at the on the ball stuff. And there's another relatively tall fellow who can get up and win a header if he needs to as well. It's something to like. You can't fit four into three there. So I wonder if you'd see in that situation where everyone was available, would you see like Sarpreet Singh playing on the left wing maybe, where he plays a fair bit in Germany as well, which I don't think you'd lose anything from doing that. That would be like that'd be pretty impressive. Like you'd have a lot of ball players in that in that kind of 11. I think also it's worth mentioning though is that international football being what it is, and harkening back to some of the stuff we're talking about earlier, just like the nature of international sport, and these kinds of sports with the international stuff doesn't always get to be like the calling the shots. I think it's probably quite rare that the All Whites will ever have a first full strength squad. You sort of just expect that someone's going to be injured, someone's going to be unavailable, et cetera, et cetera. And when that's the case, like depth is your best friend, and there is like to look at an All White squad right now. I don't know we don't know what the potential of it could be on the field because we haven't seen any of it. Like we've got no evidence. We don't know what they're going to be like. Could they upset like a team that could qualify for a World Cup? Someone like that, a top 50 team in the world. Could they do something like that? I don't know. Like we'll find out hopefully one day, but right now there's no evidence to that. But what we do know is that like looking at an All White squad, like there are bolters in this group. Calvin Kalua is a guy who's fates have aligned nicely to get him into the team. It's it's cool. He's deserving of that opportunity under the circumstances, but like realistically, he wouldn't be getting into an all-white squad. But there's like four right backs or something like that who all play in the A-League who are unavailable right now. And even still, like with the squad that was picked out of Europe and America, basically, like there are names like Ryan DeVries isn't in there. The Elliot Collier's not in there. They didn't seem to pick any of the guys from the second tier in America, the USL. I think that's probably not a coincidence because they don't break for the actually MLS doesn't either, but I think it's a little easier to negotiate with MLS teams. So like Noah Billingsley is in there, Max Mata, Kyle Adams, someone Declan Wynn is another one who plays in that level. Like there are guys who missed out anyway in this squad. But then when you consider the fact that there's probably at least a dozen players who'd be in contention who play in the A-League or, you know, the very best players in New Zealand domestic stuff, or players who are just in between things at the moment, like that's in the event that there was a full strength all-white squad, good players would be missing out, you know, and that's unfortunate for the dudes who miss out, and it does open up, like it puts a bit of pressure on the coach to be picking the right combinations and to justify selections and things like that. But that is the scenario that you want to be in as any kind of international team. Is you want to be able to have the luxury really of being able to do what you're saying before, and like not just have to pick someone out of reserve grade because there's no one else there, or picking a player who doesn't start for their club team because like, well, they always play for the All Whites, so we'll have to keep picking them. Like you get to the point where you can say, well, if you're not playing and you're not in form, we actually don't have to pick you anymore because there are players as good as you who are playing and are in form. Like that's the scenario you want to find yourself in. And the All Whites are, I won't say they're quite there yet, but they're definitely heading down. Like they're pretty far down that path towards there. It's just, yeah, the other factor is we need to find out what the players that we have. We can see what the competition is within the squad. Amongst each other, we don't really have any evidence of what that looks like against a like top 50 team in the world on the field. We still got to find out what that looks like. But yeah, the stuff we know about, the stuff that can be controlled right now, promising.
I'm going to restrict you just to saying this player's name. No explanation required, just the name. Who, because you're on the Flying Kiwis beat every week. You're following these lads very closely. Coming into these games, who is the player with the best like string of form, or who's just based upon that, like who is in form, who are you most excited to see coming off that form into this All Whites squad? Just give us a name.
In terms of club form specifically, you mean?
Yeah, the stuff you're covering on the Flying Kiwis.
Right. Because the overall would be Chris Wood, just because I need to see him scoring more All Whites goals. But in terms of club form, no explanation offered. People need to just have a gaze at the last month or so or beyond of Flying Kiwis write-ups for all the explanation. The answer to that one would be Joe Bell.
Bellinho.
That's the
righto.
one.
Steven Adams does not have a Brazilian nickname, but he is playing basketball for the Memphis Grizzlies. Stevinho. They're still playing like trial games right now. You'll be listening to this. We're recording this after the Steven Adams' first game for the Memphis Grizzlies in the NBA preseason, but there will be more games, so just keep that in mind. I found a yarn here on the Grizzly Bear Blues, who are one of the Memphis Grizzlies blogs, and I'll just read these paragraphs just to sum up some of the stuff around Steven Adams before we check in with yourself. Quote here: the New Zealand OG had a very productive debut on Beale Street. He didn't waste any time getting the party started right, as he went beast mode in his time on the court. Considering how productive he was in the 21 minutes he received, he gave us an idea of just how impactful he can be even in a limited capacity. It wasn't the double-double that impressed me. It was more so intangibles, such as his ability to set brick wall screens, getting the ball with intentions to facilitate. Whereas Jonas Valanciunas, who Steven Adams replaced, would have certainly turned his back to the basket and looked to score. Now, those buckets go to the guys Memphis is building around long term. Adams is also better on defense, as he seemed to have a better defensive position and placement than Jonas normally did last season. Steve-O was better in rim protection, switches, and hedging on screens. If nothing else, he stayed true to his reputation of being the guy who boxes out and does the dirty work for others to pad stats. Whereas others of recent something would have looked to run up the bag themselves. So those two paragraphs strictly from his first preseason game, keep that in mind, basically say what we already knew, that Steven Adams would be we can't say he would have been a massive upgrade on Jonas Valanciunas because that's kind of just Kiwi bias, but we thought he would be definitely an upgrade on Jonas Valanciunas. And it was weird when that trade was announced, there was a lot of just general NBA chat about it. And we kind of noted that there wasn't the excitement of Steven Adams getting to Memphis Grizzlies. It was more based around Jonas Valanciunas and him going to the Pelicans. But that seems to paint Steven Adams in a positive light, replacing, like, compared to the dude he replaced. And I've seen some of the feedback which it mentions in that quote. It says getting the ball with intentions to facilitate. And I saw some of the other feedback about Steven Adams' first game for the Memphis Grizzlies, where it was just his threat as a playmaker. Again, playmakers. Shout out to the Kiwi playmakers, because we're all about the mahi, but we do a bit of razzle dazzle as well. And that might be a route for Steven Adams to showcase greater upside as someone who can get the ball in the center position and set up those around him, as opposed to just like, which they mentioned about Jonas Valanciunas, you get the ball in the center position and you try and score points. Steven Adams can score points. He can also set screens for his teammates, and he can also, by the sounds of it, get assists and set up the blokes around him, not to mention the vibe here with the Memphis Grizzlies, which is immense. Like, Memphis Grizzlies are a young team, and everyone seems to love Steven Adams, as per usual. It seems like a match made in basketball heaven, not only for Steven Adams, not only for the Memphis Grizzlies, but for us supporting Steven Adams, following Steven Adams. We get him now in a young, fun Memphis Grizzlies team. You watched the game. What did you make of Steven Adams' first appearance for the Memphis Grizzlies? And once again, there are plenty more games happening by the time you'll listen to this. This is just some reactions and general chit-chat around Steven Adams' NBA preseason with the Memphis Grizzlies.
Yeah, I thought he was outstanding in that game. He had like 11 points, 10 rebounds, I think, 3 assists. Like, it was, he was not like, and this was all in about 20, 21, 22 minutes. I forget what it said in the thing you just read there. Like, basically 3/4 of action, because they didn't play the fourth quarter because a fire alarm went off, and then they had to, because of the fire alarm, like, the protocol is that the fire department had to show up and clear the scene or whatever. So all the fans got evacuated. That's my for the YouTube watchers, that's my background there, is the empty stadium afterwards. And then they said, like, we're gonna restart the game. We're still committed to, I think, because it was on TNT, like, it was being broadcast. The broadcasters were probably leading the push to get the game back on. But then as they were doing that, they were showing video of, like, the Milwaukee Bucks guys walking out with, like, the catering, you know, the trays with the tinfoil over them. And then there was a picture of, like, under the stadium or in the car park or wherever it is, like the team buses, and Brook Lopez was just in his, like, street clothes, sitting on his phone next to the driver at the front, like, got the front seat. Shout out to Brook Lopez with the front seat. I guess he needs that leg room. And, like, they obviously weren't going to play. I don't know why it took so long to call it off, but especially for a preseason game, because who cares about the fourth quarter? Once you've been stopped for like half an hour, just go home. You're only just going to risk injury doing stuff like that. And we saw all we needed to see from Memphis in the first 3 quarters anyway. Like, Ja Morant was outstanding, and Steven Adams was, like, he was excellent. He did exactly what they need him to do. It's a funny one because if you compare him to Jonas Valanciunas, like just head to head, Adams is a better defender. Valanciunas is probably considerably better on it as a scorer, as that kind of thing. He is someone who will post up. He's very good like that. At finishing those chances, he rebounds at a similar rate to Adams. Probably not quite as dominant on the like offensive boards, but just as good. Probably more so because there's a little more to do with the teams they played on, as to why Adams's defensive rebounds aren't always as high. But still, like just looking at them in isolation, Adams is probably overall balancing all the factors a weaker player than Jonas Valanciunas. And I think that's the sort of thing that we heard a lot of after that trade, is why Valanciunas was seen as more of the focus. That, and also because it ties into the, like, everyone loves to talk about Zion Williamson and the Pelicans and will he re-sign and what's going to happen there, and why do we keep mentioning the New York Knicks in this conversation and things like that. That drew away the focus from Adams a bit. But I think when the point that gets lost there is it's not just a straight up swap center for center. It's also a straight up swap for like how that center plays with Ja Morant, with Kyle Anderson, with Dylan Brooks didn't play that game, but Dylan Brooks and guys like with Jaren Jackson Jr. maybe most importantly of all behind Ja Morant. Like, that's also a factor, the fit on the team and things like that. I think we saw in that game the ways in which Adams is I'm not like, I can't compare them to Valanciunas anymore at this point, but like we saw the ways in which he fits so nicely. The screen game is ideal for someone like Ja Morant. Like, he is going to love that. Russell Westbrook loved it. And honestly, the more I watch Ja Morant, the more I know you sort of like, it seems almost a little bit disrespectful to like an emerging superstar player to be like, he's just like this other guy. But like he probably would rather be known as his own dude. But the similarities are uncanny watching them play. Like, it's uncanny. And Adams not only was super successful playing with Russell Westbrook, Russell Westbrook won an MVP with Adams as the starting center. Not only was that like they're a natural fit there, but also like Adams has picked up lessons from that he can then impart to Ja Morant as he develops and things like this. And the screens are going to be huge for him. He's one of the leading screen assist dudes in the NBA anyway, and he's now on a team where he's got quite a few guys who like to play that way, and he is going to help facilitate that. And not only facilitating off the ball like that, but there's we saw quite a few of the old like sort of dribble handoff type scenarios, just like flip the ball to the center at the top of the key, and multiple times actually you'd then get a guy cutting in behind the guy who's marking Adams, and Adams just like flicking a little sneaky pass. Like, his passing is, in the last 2 seasons in particular, his assist rates have shot up. He used to be like sort of a 1 per game guy, and then I think his last season in OKC was sort of like 3 a game, and he was at a similar rate with the Pelicans, albeit not really given the same opportunity to do as much of that. So didn't make the right, I think he might have dropped slightly, I don't know. But clearly, like in the last couple of years, he's emerged as someone who's a very good passer out of those set scenarios. And they're going to run a lot of that for him by the looks of it. And if they do that, he's going to continue to get like 3 or so assists per game, perhaps more. He did. It feels like more of an anomaly to think about it now with the passage of time, but he did get a triple-double last season at one point. And all of that kind of stuff is like, he even like his first bucket for his first point for the Grizzlies as well was a free throw, which was not how, I don't think that you would have got long odds on that from the bookies if that was the case. But he was getting offensive boards. He was doing Steven Adams-y things. I think the first like thing full stop that he did was almost throw himself out of bounds to grab a loose ball rebound, which is, in preseason areas, that's always impressive. And I will chuck in one other, like, what do you call it, variable to this matter, is that for all of that, like, if he just plays that style of game for as many out of 82 games as he can manage, plus hopefully playoffs if they can get there, like, if he plays like that, he's going to do well. But there's scope for like big improvement too, because I think there were quite a few times where you saw like there are at least two, probably three or four, where like he tried to play the pick and roll thing with Ja Morant, and Ja Morant's pass was just a little bit off. Or he went, there was one where like Coach Dan Van Gundy was a weird one listening to him on the commentary because he coached Steven Adams last season, but he sort of didn't really acknowledge any of that. He was trying to keep it impartial, but he mentioned at one point, like Ja Morant went around and Adams got called for a moving screen, and Van Gundy was like, this is a situation that you see quite often in the NBA where like the center is called, the big man's called for the illegal screen, but actually it's really the point guard's fault because he's gone a little bit too early. He needs to like wait an extra dribble before going around so that the big man can get set first, get his like feet sorted, and those kind of things. Like that's a mistake in chemistry. The lob passes that don't quite make it back to Adams because they're overthrown or underthrown or whatever. That's a mistake in chemistry. There are a couple others with like some of those cutting sort of backdoor passes I was talking about before. Like he missed one or two of them as well. Like that's all of these about rhythm and understanding with your teammates. And these were signs of like a guy who's still settling in, and like teammates who on both sides are still working out the best ways to play with each other. And that is like that. I mean, preseason is the time to see those mistakes, right? That's the point to make. It's like, it's not like we're looking at this and being like, oh, well, they didn't fit. Like, no, it's like, this is the very first opportunity and we're seeing room here for growth. And you can only assume that they will grow on those kind of things as they get more time on the court together. That's exciting. Like to see mistakes like that in preseason is actually exciting because those are the kind of mistakes that will probably get fixed. And when they get fixed, you add to an even bigger impact for Steven Adams with this team, and they already seem to love him there. The fans, the media, there was actually someone, I saw a photo on Twitter of some like a fan in the stands who had like a "We forgive you, Steven Adams" sign kind of thing, throwing it all the way back to his rookie season, which he talked about a bit on some of his media stuff. The media love him. His teammates seem to love him as well, which is the most important thing. And I suspect his coach probably quite rates what he's got to offer as well. So it's crazy how last season there were just continuing moments where it was like, oh, these are some bad vibes. The stuff, mostly stuff he couldn't control, etc. And let's, from the pandemic all the way down to like Zion Williamson's positioning and his contract and things like that, to his own injuries and whatever. And like compare that to this season, where it just seems that every opportunity where there's like a tipping point, it goes in towards the thing where like it goes towards the positive thing. I don't know if Steven Adams is just like he's due all his good karma points or something at once, but he seems to be cashing out on them.
And to your point about the assists, his last two seasons have been his highest assists, his best assisting seasons. Last season with OKC, 1920. He had 2.3 assists, and then last season with the Pelicans, he had 1.9. They are the best of his career. And it just sounds like if Steven Adams does the basics really well, it's going to be hugely beneficial to Memphis Grizzlies. And then the fun thing is that there is also room for Steven Adams to grow into his role with this team and add a bit of funk, add a bit of pizzazz, a bit of extra juice there as well. So we will be keeping a very close eye, as always, on Steven Adams and also Sean Marks pulling the strings at the Brooklyn Nets. It'll be interesting to see how he deals with certain situations around the Brooklyn Nets.
Can I say one thing on that situation though with Sean Marks is the likelihood now seems that Kyrie Irving is not going to do the community-minded thing and go out and get his COVID jab, which would mean because of the rules in New York State, he can't play home games because he can't be a part, like unvaccinated people aren't allowed to be part of like bigger organized activities like that. There's only a couple states where that's a factor, but New York State is one of them. So that would mean that Kyrie Irving cannot play home games or train with the team and those things. The one thing I will say on that is like, regardless of all of that, like shove the Kyrie stuff to the side, let's treat him as if he's injured. Sean Marks has deliberately built a team in which he can cope with one of the superstars being out. Like that's the whole point of what he's been trying to do. Trading for James Harden.
Woo-wee.
There we go. Trading for James Harden is one of those, like, you got three guys who are all, two of them former MVPs, one of them like the next level below MVP caliber. Like, that's the point. Is like most teams, if your best player gets injured, sorry about it. Like, that's just your season done. You don't really cope with that. It's how it goes. Like, it's sort of the end of the Golden State Warriors dynasty. At least that faction of it was when everyone got hurt at once. Like, it's part of the game and it happens. And if you have one of your top players in any sport, is similar. Like, if your best player gets injured, it's very hard to win without them. It's just bad luck. Unless you happen to have three guys that good. And not only that, but like we saw in the last playoffs, Brooklyn went to Game 7 against the eventual champion Milwaukee Bucks with 1.5 of their 3-star players. Like, Kyrie Irving wasn't there; he was injured. James Harden missed half of the thing. I think Kyrie might have got injured at the start of that series. I can't remember if he played the first couple games or not. But James Harden played on one leg for the last few and was like a shadow of himself. But not Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant just went ballistic and was like just unstoppable and almost led them there. Like, he was a toe away. 2-pointer that would have been a 3-pointer if he just had smaller feet. But like, that's part of like that is a factor of what Sean Marks has been trying to do. You got three guys, there's at least a little bit of like cover. You can still win a championship with 2 superstar players and a good supporting cast. And then that good supporting cast is the other point, is that his work, like once he got those 3 guys, they're at least one of them is injury prone. 2 of them have had serious injuries in their thing. James Harden doesn't normally have injuries, but he had a few last season to deal with. But like, he specifically then also went and got guys like Patty Mills and Paul Millsap and LaMarcus Aldridge coming back, re-signed Blake Griffin. You already got Joe Harris there, and like guys like this who Bruce Brown is another one. Like, guys like this who can fill in more than adequately. Like, this was the whole point, is to be able to have a team where you remove that usual like jeopardy situation where like if your star player goes down, you bug it. They're trying to craft a team where like that's not even a factor. You can lose a star player. So if Kyrie Irving does miss half a season, the point being that the Brooklyn Nets are set up to be able to cope with that. They were sort of expecting to have to deal with that anyway, with injuries or whatever. At least it's something that you might as well, if you're in the position to do that kind of diligence, then you do. Most teams do not have that luxury. The Brooklyn Nets do. And if any team can cope with something like that, they're the one that can do it.
So Sean Marks knew Kyrie Irving was going to be absent. He knew there was incoming drama there. Just added a bit of depth, but a low-key Kiwi depth, which is what Sean Marks is very skillful NBA GM and very creative in how he has, as you've outlined previously, wiggled through various Brooklyn Nets situations. Let's finish with a bit of Plunket Shield cricket, which apparently, COVID stuff depending, will start on October 23. You will have Canterbury versus CD in Christchurch, and there will also be Wellington Firebirds hosting the Otago Volts, and I believe the women's season will start the week after. We are going to be touching on Plunket Shield cricket pretty frequently over the summer, as we always do. And I have written 2 things about the Plunket Shield, just building the fizz is what I've titled them. The first of which revolved around a couple of Blackcaps I was curious about. And that's where we're going to just root this discussion for 10 minutes or 15 minutes or so, just touching on a couple Plunket Shield players wildcard who we are interested in with that Blackcaps context. Of course, Plunket Shield cricket, like if you've got the chance to get on down and see Ross Taylor bat in Canterbury, amazing. And he's probably going to be doing so against Henry Nicholls, Tom Latham, Matt Henry. So there's plenty of, like, if you get along and watch Plunket Shield, you're going to be watching Blackcaps and you're going to be having a jolly old time. the three players I specifically mentioned in my first Plunket Shield Fizz yarn was Ross Taylor, Finn Allen, Wellington Firebirds batsman, and Jacob Duffy with the Otago Volts. They, like Ross Taylor, we're just checking in with his domestic form, because his domestic form is going to be the building blocks for his like late career Tom Brady period. If Ross Taylor's not scoring runs in the Plunket Shield and he is horribly out of form, it's going to start to niggle at his Blackcaps future, I think. And there'll just be more, you'll hear more stuff about Ross Taylor being on the outer or needing to retire or whatever it is. Alternatively, Ross Taylor could dominate the Plunket Shield and genuinely get into that Tom Brady mold where he doesn't look like retiring anytime soon. I think we both want that version of Ross Taylor in the Plunket Shield this summer. Finn Allen's really interesting because he had that century against England in a tour game a few years back. And last summer, he exploded as a slugger, just a six-hitter of the certified six-hitter variety, and didn't quite do that in the Plunket Shield. So it's just curious to see what kind of batsman Finn Allen wants to be in the domestic landscape, and like how he goes about his mahi as well, because Finn Allen does love to give it a tonk, and that's where his newfound confidence is really, or not, he's always had confidence, I presume, but the fruits of his labor have been in smacking the ball around to the boundary. So what's he going to do in the Plunket Shield? It's currently October in Aotearoa. These games will be played in late October. And I imagine if Finn Allen is coming up against some seam bowling, specifically Jacob Duffy and the Otago Volts, juicy pitches, lots of moisture in the air and in the pitch. I don't know if Finn Allen's going to be able to whack sixes everywhere with the moving red ball, so that'll be interesting. And then, of course, Jacob Duffy, he's been on the scene for ages, finally cracked into some Blackcap stuff last summer in the T20 cricket, I think. And he is the bowler who comes to mind if we're thinking about like Tim Southee replacement. And that means swing bowling. There's a lot of different types of bowlers in Aotearoa, obviously, but it's cool because we've got some X factor. We've got Lockie Ferguson, we've got Kyle Jamieson, we've got players who have an extra pizzazz or just oomph to their work. Jacob Duffy is a quintessential Kiwi swing bowler, and I think he's actually finished first in Plunket Shield wickets for the last 2 seasons. And if he starts on fire this season, it's going to set him up nicely to try and crack into the test team, I reckon. So not sure if you want to touch on those 3 players, wildcard, or if you have another Blackcap. Obviously, these lads we're talking about won't be at the T20 World Cup. So we're just strictly talking about the players who are going to be playing Plunket Shield or are likely to be playing Plunket Shield. Does anyone else come to mind? Like, you're going to have Tom Latham, you're going to have the Henry Nichols types, but we've also got these lads who have, like, Jacob Duffy and Finn Allen have both got a taste of Blackcaps cricket in T20 cricket, and now they're coming back to the Plunket Shield, and that's what I found really interesting. So is there anyone else in that category who has enjoyed Blackcaps promotion, either in one-day cricket or T20 cricket, who is going to be coming back into the Plunket Shield with some sort of funk to your mind?
I mean, I think you've highlighted the 3 guys who are the most interesting for reasons that you've discussed. But before I go on any further, Ross Taylor's decision to not go play just those 3 ODI games in Pakistan worked out pretty well, didn't it? I think in the end, he's probably in a good place there for having dodged that whole scenario. Maybe
Mystic Ross Taylor, just predicting, foreseeing the future, like doesn't want a bar of it.
Yeah, he just, priorities in the right place or whatever. I don't know. But I think maybe you could like expand the group out to just, Rachi Ravindra would be an interesting one because of having he's been around the Blackcaps this year quite a bit. He was an extended part of the Test Championship final squad. He was, he got to actually play a few games and we played all the games, didn't he, in Bangladesh in the 2020 stuff there. So big season. I always think it's a big season for players when they've got that first taste of international cricket. Is like, what do you then do coming back domestically the next season? Like, do you take that experience and then sort of filter it into like just exponential growth, or do you maybe feel like you've done a lot of the hard work and you ease off just a little bit? Like, so there's people who get that chance and then work double hard afterwards to maintain it. And then there's people who sort of like, it's not that they're not working hard. No one's like shying off at this level, but maybe who don't use it as a motivation to up things and just like hold on the trajectory. And then you're leaving yourself up for grabs there a little bit, because if you then dip your form, suddenly those fringe Blackcap selections don't happen anymore. So like the way that someone like Rachi Ravindra consolidates the taste of international cricket is going to be pretty interesting. And I also think on the other end of the scale, like AJS Patel was the star dude in that series, and he's someone who at Plunket Shield level consistently takes wickets. A lot of them is because he bowls a lot of overs. He's that kind of guy. He's a workhorse spinner as well. You sort of have to be to take wickets in New Zealand conditions. And the early stages of the Plunket Shield always favor seam bowling, as you mentioned. Like, and that's a challenge for AJS Patel, but like, I don't think he shies away from a challenge. I don't think that's a problem for him. Like, it'll be interesting just to keep an eye. I don't want to put him quite in the same bracket just for those obvious reasons like this. He's going to be bowling spin overs for CD, presuming he's playing, on wet decks where he's not going to get a lot of assistance and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And presumably we're not really expecting high scoring innings in the first couple of rounds. It tends to not be what happens. In which case your spinner's probably not going to get through that many overs anyway. So with that in mind, I don't really think it's fair to put pressure on him, but it will be interesting to see how he goes, because he's another one who like is probably I think most people would agree he's the number one test spinner now at this point. I think he's probably set himself up there. It's just that we don't always pick a spinner. So he's got to show why we should be picking one in these conditions. Is an interesting one for him. But he has taken a lot of Plunket Shield wickets in the past, so that's something he knows how to do. But yeah, I'll keep a cheeky eye on AJS Patel as well. Were there other names that you had as well that you considered that are second tiers or whatever?
Well, it's good you mentioned AJS Patel, because I think there's a group there with the Central District Stags. Obviously, quite partial to Doug Bracewell. Do like a bit of Doug Bracewell, but so like any time for anyone who's listening for the first time or just new to these kind of Kiwi cricket yarns, anytime I do mention Doug Bracewell, it's because I like him as a cricketer. And I am partial to his method of outswing bowling. It's absolutely delightful. But so I say that because I'm probably going to say Doug Bracewell as an interesting cricketer every single summer. But maybe a different way of framing that is that Doug Bracewell is the perfect plug and play cricketer for the Blackcaps. Because if you need someone for a test, or if you need someone for a series, I think Doug Bracewell can be that guy where you know what you're going to get. You're just going to get good, decent, medium pace. You're going to get someone who can bat and someone who's going to absolutely tear around the field and do the hard yards in the field for his team and all that stuff. And the likes of Kane Williamson, Tim Southey, Trent Bolt, they know Doug Bracewell well. So I find Doug Bracewell interesting in that regard, where he is someone who, if there's an injury, if there's an unavailability, and you don't want to change your Blackcaps team too much, you can just chuck in Doug Bracewell and he'll do a solid job. That is kind of dependent on Doug Bracewell maintaining a certain level of performance in the Plunket Shield. And off the top of my head, I think he has averaged 25 or so with the ball for the last 2 seasons. So he's still out here playing good cricket. And the last few seasons have also seen him improve a lot with the bat. So if you're a fan of Doug Bracewell's batting back in 2011, whenever it was, you're probably going to enjoy Doug Bracewell's batting now. But again, that is all just to say that Doug Bracewell, good start to the Plunket Shield. He could put himself in that kind of squad position where you go away on tour, you take Doug Bracewell with you. You've already got someone who can step into various roles right there in your squad. So that's Doug Bracewell. Ajaz Patel, as you mentioned, it's going to be really interesting. And then you've got Will Young as well. Will Young showed his class in Bangladesh, I think, and has cracked his way into the test team. You've kind of sparked all this in my mind. So I'm kind of thinking about this as I say it. Bracewell, everything I said about Bracewell is true, and I feel it in my loins, but there are young cricketers snapping on his heels. Will Young's the same. We love Will Young, and these lads have been slow cooked in the crock pot for the Blackcaps, but there is this fresh crop of Kiwi cricketers, as we've mentioned with the All Whites, as we've mentioned with the Kiwis, and all of Aotearoa sport. The younger brigade is really, really talented. So Will Young, if he has any lapse in Plunket Shield form and you get other lads, you might get Rachin Ravindra come out and be really good. You might get any number of Kiwi cricketers just start to find a golden run of form and put pressure on someone like Will Young, who is on the Blackcaps fringes. I don't see that happening with the spinner, though. There is a lack of young, talented spinners with domestic experience. There are guys coming into domestic cricket, but they got to do something in domestic cricket first. Ajaz Patel's kind of on his perch as that spinner guy. So, but I do think within the Stags group, you've got 3 players right there who could change their position in terms of Blackcaps rankings with a really hot start to the Plunket Shield, I reckon.
What about the one other thing I've got hanging around in my brain at the moment while you're saying all that is BJ Walling has retired, right? Haven't had a test series since then. The focus will be on 2020s for the next month or so with the World T20s on the horizon. But eventually we play test cricket again. Tom Blundell goes in. He will be the number 1 wicketkeeper for the Blackcaps, but who goes into the previously held Tom Blundell role of backup wicketkeeper? Like, there is an opportunity there for others to start putting their names up and putting their hands up for contention, et cetera, et cetera. There is the option of, like, if it was just, Tom Blundell before he got the nudge as an opener for a wee while there, his Blackcaps caps had come along at times where, like, Watling was injured for a test or something like that. If that were to happen to Tom Blundell, if he was to, I don't know, just, hurt a finger or something like that, or just be feeling ill on day one or something, and we'll be like, well, you sit this test out, come back, play the next one when you're feeling better. That kind of scenario, we just need a one-off replacement. I sort of think maybe they would lean towards just like Tom Latham or Devon Conway or someone to take the gloves for a match, especially if it was a home game where they probably feel fairly confident about anyway, because we have an outstanding record at home at the moment. Having said that, you still normally travel with 2 wicketkeepers in the squad. I don't know if Tom Latham as an opening batsman in Test match cricket, and Devon Conway, who's likely to also be an opening batsman in Test match cricket moving forward, like, that's a lot to put that pressure on someone to be keeping for multiple days and also opening the batting, especially when if you are like the second innings when you've been keeping for I don't know, 120 overs or something like that, and then you're coming into straight away like you've got 10 minutes to swap your shirt or something, splash yourself with a wet flannel or whatever, and then swap the wicket keeping pads for the batting pads and grab your bat and get out there. That's tough. So I don't know. You would normally have a second wicket keeper, and I'm just wondering, like, I don't know if there's necessarily a clear candidate for that at the moment. Is it like Dan Cleaver or someone maybe? Or I don't know that they would be thinking Tim Seifert for longer form stuff, but who knows? Like, is there someone you've seen there, or are there indeed, like, keeping on the theme, are there like young fellas coming through who could be could be due for a breakout season who haven't had that sort of recognition yet?
I think it's just the group that Blundell was part of a few years back. You've got Dane Cleaver, you've got Tim Seifert, you've got Cameron Fletcher, most notably. And back in like 2017, 18-ish, it was very similar to the spin situation that we've discussed, where each spinner in New Zealand cricket, whether it be Ish Sodhi, Mitchell Santner, Todd Astle, Will Somerville, Ajaz Patel, you could point to certain statistics and say they are the best spinner. So someone could genuinely say, like, Will Somerville, he's the best spinner in New Zealand, and bring out a certain specific stat as reinforcement to that. So it's kind of like, you had at that stage, you have to let go, especially me in this kind of position. I have to let go of my ego, because I can hear and I can listen to really good cases for anyone else to be the best spinner in New Zealand. And it's less about just my personal opinion, because whether it's Todd Astle, Will Somerville, Ajaz Patel, Ish Sodhi, or Mitchell Santner, they each have a certain stat that is really good in building that case. If I go back a few years, it was the same thing with the wicket keepers, because yes, someone saw something in Tom Blundell where it was like, he's going to be a Blackcaps test batsman. I don't know what it was, but someone saw that. But at the same time, like going back to 17, 18, Tim Seifert was jacking up big Plunket Shield runs. Dane Cleaver was scoring a shitload of runs. Cameron Fletcher is also scoring a shitload of runs in different formats. And I think this is where we're getting into the strength of Kiwi cricket, because I don't see the young wicketkeeper in the same way I don't necessarily see the young spinner right now coming into the Blackcaps mix. But in those positions where you don't have the young upstarts, you've got very good, solid, serviceable players. So you might just select Tim Seifert as part of your test squad as backup wicketkeeper, and that's fine. That's all good. You might also select Dane Cleaver, cousin of Kane Williamson, apparently. That's also all good. That's completely fine. These dudes they've all played at least 5, 6, 7 years of domestic cricket. They have all been part of New Zealand under-19 teams. They've all like played New Zealand A cricket as well. So even if it's someone like Cameron Fletcher, he can at least do a job. And he's like, there's nothing wrong with selecting Cameron Fletcher as a backup wicketkeeper in a test squad. Because I think in the white ball, we're looking at Devon Conway, we're looking at Glenn Phillips as wicket-keeping options. Tim Seifert's going to... Devon Conway said in a departure video for the World Cup, T20 World Cup, he basically said he's not going to be the wicket-keeper. So Tim Seifert is probably going to be the T20 World Cup wicket-keeper by the sounds of it. So in white ball cricket, all that stuff is there. Like you've got the part-timers, Glenn Phillips and Devon Conway, you've got Tim Seifert. But as far as like the backup test wicketkeeper to carry with you in a squad, because as you said, like Tom Latham can do a job, blah, blah, blah. I think it's just that group. And if you select one person from that group of Seifert, Cleaver, and Fletcher, I don't think there's a massive difference between them where it's like, oh no, they selected Cleaver over Seifert. That sucks. No, they've all been doing a really good job in the domestic circuit for a long time. And the strength of Kiwi cricket is such where you can select these dudes in a backup position and they're going to, I think they'll get better. Like we've seen with Blundell, he just got into the squad, stayed there, did the mahi, and he developed. if you like it, that same thing can happen to any of the other three lads in this mix as well. So they're all going to be wicket keepers for the teams, except for Tim Cypher, who's over in the IPL and the World Cup. So you'll get a good glimpse at the likes of Lundell, Cleaver, and Fletcher. But yeah, that's the backup group right there, and it'll be interesting to see. As always, like it's the same thing every summer. Which of these wicket keepers scores the most runs, and who has the greatest impact on winning as well?
It's interesting that there's that parallel between spinners and wicket keepers, where there's maybe not, not as many players coming through at the moment, and I suspect that's not a coincidence because, generally speaking, first class game, a first class 11 in New Zealand conditions, you're picking one spinner and you're picking one wicket keeper. You're definitely only picking one wicket keeper. Whereas if you're like a top order batsman, even if you're a specialist opener, there's still two opening spots that are going around. If you're a top order batsman, you could squeeze into one of six, potentially 4 to 6 positions. If you're an all-rounder, you'll often see a couple of them as long as you can bowl a bit of seam, generally speaking, although sometimes, being a batsman who can bowl a little bit of spin might even keep a more specialist spinner out of the team entirely. So it's probably not a coincidence that those are two areas where it's difficult to develop players for the Blackcaps, where like you just don't get that many opportunities to give them reps at the domestic level. Especially like I got to imagine if you're a like up and coming wicketkeeper. I mean, it's a bit different because you don't play international cricket as a wicketkeeper without being able to bat as well these days. So like you can still get into the team as a batsman and just focus on that. So it's not like the be all and end all. But if you were like just a star gloveman who happens to be a couple years younger than Tom Blundell or something, that's a bit awkward, eh? You're really hoping he cracks the Blackcaps so that you can actually get to show what you can do with the gloves at domestic scene. Because otherwise you're just stuck for like most of your, like if it's only a couple of years difference, that's most of your career where you're just going to be in the shadows. That's probably difficult, but that's the way it goes. That's why we actually haven't seen a lot of player movement, have we? But you will now and then when someone needs a player like that, you will see someone pop over somewhere else, hit up a different franchise. The only one I had a quick squiz at the things. The only one I noticed was George Worker's gone to Auckland, hasn't he? There are other like transfers that have mattered. I really like that from Auckland's point of view, by the way. I think that's it's a really, I don't think it changes anything for George Worker. I think he's sort of capped where he is career-wise. But like I can see him being of great impact for Auckland specifically. Like for them to get a sturdy opener, I think is real helpful. But is there anyone else who's been moving around?
Just on Worker in Auckland, I think especially like the Auckland batting lineup is quite young. You've got the O'Donnell brothers, you've got Mark Chapman, you've got those sort of characters and Sean Solier. They've all been on the scene for a while, but they are still quite young. And as you said, George Worker, you lose Jet Raval, so you bring in George Worker the following summer. And I think George Worker actually lives in Auckland, so it's all convenience. Same with Corey Anderson. Shout out Corey Anderson. The only other move was Nathan Smith from Otago to Wellington. So that continues the theme of Wellington cricket. Really good recruitment. Like they recruited Lee Kasprick from Otago to join Wellington. They recruited Maddie Green from Auckland to join Wellington on the women's side. And then we've seen Finn Allen was recruited from Auckland. Nathan Smith was recruited from Otago. Like all those, like Logan Van Beek, Hamish Bennett, they were recruited from Canterbury. So Wellington is definitely like the recruiters, but they also develop from within. So it's just a well-run operation. But Nathan Smith is the other one moving up from Otago to Wellington. Good, solid all-rounder as well. We'll see what tickles our fancy talk and Plunket Shield cricket next week as well. We'll just keep touching base. We'll build it up, and hopefully we get actually get some Plunket Shield cricket, that would be fantastic as well. Big it up to yourself. We'll finish the Niche Cast episode here. Stay beautiful. Kia kaha. Choo choo.